What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 7 predictions. As always, I got Ty joining me here on this week's show to break down this week's games. But before we can do that, we got to talk about last week. And Ty, I'll give you the floor here after going 9-3 last week.
Yeah, well, I finally won a week. I think the game we got to talk about that's not even on here, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't bring up the Penn State UCLA crazy upset. And I've heard it all week that Texas fans should be very thankful for that game happening at the same time because a lot of people would be talking about that game, but just completely overshadowed. We're both Michigan fans and experienced the Appalachian State game when we were very young. This game, I think, maybe rivals that just because of how bad UCLA was going into this game. A lot of people thought they were going to go 0-12 this year, and lots of question marks surrounding Penn State and James Franklin at the moment.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Obviously, not just coming off of a loss to Oregon, but you and then lose to UCLA. I mean, they thought this was going to be the year that they would run the table. So, what's the future hold? And what's the future hold for North Carolina? 'Cause there's reports that Bill Belichick's already talking about a buyout and going somewhere else, and who knows what that is after they got waxed by Clemson. But the team that we aren't talking about enough still. It's Texas Tech and what they're doing. I mean, they've
Yeah.
won every single game by 24 points or more, which is just crazy to me how they are the number 9 team in the country in the AP poll, but severely overlooked in a crowded Big 12, and they just keep on finding ways to win ball games. And we'll go to our locks of the week last week. Another mediocre week for me, but good for you getting in that positive area and climbing your way back up to 500 here. Obviously, the picks that I had all were not even close. But the ones that hit obviously were not blowouts, but the very half point, let's say. I won two of my three on a half point. So not a good week at all for me, but wins are wins.
I'll say I was pretty close because that Alabama cover was pretty weak in my opinion. I think it was 23-14 very late in the game. We're talking like 30 seconds to go and they scored a late touchdown to cover. So that's a little fishy there. And Purdue was definitely in the game against Illinois. So I'm only talking myself up because I think this is my first winning week of the whole season. So it's a bounce back and we're going to build off this.
Yeah, and we'll go into week 7 here. As you can see, I'm on the left, and I got an under in the Alabama-Missouri game. I think both those teams want to run the ball, and time of possession is kind of what both these teams pride themselves in. So I think the under is going to hit in that one. Then obviously just straight spreads there. I got OU 1.5, Texas A&M -7.5, Oregon 7.5, Michigan +2.5 on the road, and Arizona State +5.5 on the road.
Yeah, I'm not feeling super confident in a couple of these because I'm going the opposite direction of you. But I'm starting off with Ohio State. As much as I can't stand them, I feel like I'm gonna keep riding them on these big spreads because they just continue to cover. I see it happening again. I know Illinois had the big win, but they did lose to Indiana by 53. So I think 14 and a half for the best team in the country. They should cover that. I'm going with Texas. I think this is kind of a coin flip game. I actually don't think Mateer is going to play. I'm leaning that direction. And I just think Texas is going to have a huge chip on their shoulder. They're coming off a really bad loss, and it's their arch rival. So I think big chip on the shoulder here for Texas. And yes, you're reading that right. I'm going with Kent State -2.5 over UMass. These are the two worst teams in FBS, but UMass is just that bad, where I think Kent State is going to cover at home. I'm going the other way on Indiana. Going to Oregon. I know that's tough, but that Penn State win not quite aging as well for Oregon now. I'm going Nebraska -6.5 at Maryland, who choked away a game last week. Like I said, September Maryland is gone. And then Minnesota -7.5, bouncing back from getting smoked by Ohio State.
And then we got our first game of the week on Friday night, and it's more than likely a shot at the playoff for the group of 5 teams. And they're heavyweights at this point in the season because North Texas 5-0, USF 4-1, and obviously USF's only loss is out of conference. So it's a huge conference play here in the American. I'm going North Texas at home. Byron Brown and USF, though, have, done it time in and time out already this year and proved us wrong. I wouldn't be shocked if they prove us wrong here on the road, but USF, don't forget though, in 2 weeks, end of October, they go to Memphis. So if they do lose this game, they still have a really good chance to not only get into the American Championship, but to possibly still get that Group of Five bid.
Yeah, I think the American Conference race is going to be awesome this year. I think people that love college football should be paying more attention to it because I think the Group of Five spot is going to come from the American. I'd be shocked if it didn't. These two teams are both very good. Like you said, Memphis, very good. So I think this game will be a great Friday night game, a great game to lead into the week. But that being said, I think North Texas has been very underrated this year, off to a 5-0 start, and has been pretty dominant doing it. So I think getting this game at home will be big for them. And I think the South Florida magic kind of dies here, and North Texas gets a big win.
Then moving to Saturday, we got Alabama going on the road to face Missouri. And you're looking at that correctly. I'm going with Missouri here. And I say that because it's at home. I think if this game was at Alabama, I'm probably leaning towards Alabama. But Missouri, if you look at their schedule, they haven't played an away game yet. And, obviously good vibes come at home and it just keeps on rolling here. I know that the probably toughest team they faced could either argue Kansas or South Carolina. But it doesn't matter because Bo Prabula in this offense shows up time in and time out. They're averaging, I think it's like 41 points a game, and they're not giving up that many. So, flip side though, Bama in this offense is super explosive. They're going to try to throw the ball, Ty Simpson. And I think the run game concerns me for Alabama. That's kind of why I'm leaning Missouri here because, like you always say, your famous saying, defense and run game travel on the road. But when you don't have a run game, I think Missouri is going to game plan more against Ty Simpson, and I think Missouri's going to pull off a big upset here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because, like you said, Alabama's struggling a little in the run game, but I think Missouri's pass defense is suspect this year. We kind of saw that with how Kansas marched up and down the field on them. But then you could say the same about Alabama's run defense. I think Missouri could have some success there. So I think it'll come down to which defensive unit can have the most success. And I think I got a slightly lean Alabama there. I think they're going to force Bo Prabula to make plays through the air. And I think Ty Simpson's just going to make a few more plays than he will. So I think it will be a very close game. I think right around that spread, but I think the Tide go in there and get a big road win.
And then also at 12, you got Ohio State and Illinois, and I don't even think this is going to be a close game at halftime. I'm kind of with you here on the spread. Ohio State is just going to throw the ball very well, and it's just going to be a big, big game here for the Ohio State wide receiver core. I don't care who it is that's going to take over. Someone's going to have a huge game here because Illinois can't stop it. If they gave up, what was it, 63 to Indiana,
63.
I think Ohio State has a chance to put up a 70 spot here. Illinois' pass defense, passing yards per game is over 250, and that's 111th in the country. So now you got way better receivers coming in and a better offense. I just don't like this matchup at all for Illinois. But on the positive side, the only way Illinois can win this game is if they limit the turnovers and keep it close heading into the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I don't think this will be quite like the Indiana game. I somewhat agree with you where I think Ohio State probably could score close to 60 if they wanted to here. But I think it's just going to be another kind of methodical game like Ohio State's had all year. The Washington game, they just completely took the crowd and the offense out of it for Washington. I think it'll be more of the same. Ohio State's pass defense has been probably the best in the country. So I think they'll shut down Luke Altmaier. And Julian Sayin will make the plays that they let him make. And I think it'll be like a 28-6 type of game, a similar game to what we've seen two or three times already. And I think the Buckeyes dominate.
Yeah, then the Red River Shootout, we don't do the woke terms, I guess you could say now. The Red River Showdown. No, still the shootout here on this show. And I'm going OU here. I'm thinking John Mateer is going to somehow force his way into this lineup if he has to wear a mustache and shave his head and be the starting quarterback. He's going to do whatever it takes to start in this game. And I don't know, it just seems like Oklahoma, this game is going to decide, I think, how the rest of the SEC plays out. Because if you go look at their schedule, it's at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, home against Missouri, home against LSU. There's not a lot of wiggle room here. And if Oklahoma can beat Texas, pretty much knocks them out of SEC play. And then after that, the gauntlet, and everyone has to go through Oklahoma. But if they lose this one, it's just going to be pure chaos in the SEC moving forward, which obviously would be great to see for all of us fans, but I just don't think that's going to happen here this week.
I just think this one's a little bit of a case of Oklahoma hearing all season about how good they are, and now Texas and especially Arch Manning have to spend this whole week hearing about how much they suck from everybody. So I think it's going to, like I said, a big chip on the shoulder for Texas. The perfect place you can be in after coming off a tough loss is playing your arch rival. I mean, so much motivation going into this game. And I'm still not completely sold on Oklahoma, even though they beat my Wolverines. I think the rushing attack for Oklahoma, very suspect. And if Mateer isn't playing, I think that offense is going to become very one-dimensional in a bad way. So I think the Texas defense, which struggled last week, is going to tighten up, and I think the Longhorns win a low-scoring game.
I think 1 week ago, I'd be taking Maryland here if they could have beat Washington at home, but they didn't. And not only did they cost me a pick in the right direction, they cost my faith in this Maryland team moving forward. I was kind of in on them, like you said. Maybe this is the year that they don't have those October blues, but it's just not the case. I'm going Nebraska here on the road. Dylan Raiola is going to show out here in this one. I mean, their pass defense for Nebraska is number one in the country, at least on yards allowed, allowing less than 100 a game, where they average about 320 passing yards a game. So I think this is going to be a high-flying air raid game for Nebraska, and I think they honestly pull away here late in the fourth.
Yeah, I think Nebraska lost that game to Michigan, and people just kind of grouped them in with the last 4 or 5 Nebraska teams that we've hyped up. But I do think this team has some talent, and I think they're going to still make some noise this season. And you hit on it. I mean, it's the date starts with a 10, doesn't start with a 9. So I think Maryland, we're already starting to see the slide with the way they blew that game last week. So I think even with this game being on the road, be plenty of Nebraska fans there. And I think Dylan Raiola is going to be slinging it, and the Huskers go in there and win. And I think they cover as well.
And possibly the biggest game until Michigan, Ohio State in the Big Ten. Indiana goes on the road to face Oregon. And Indiana, I think if they win this game or lose it, doesn't matter what happens, I think. Their toughest test is at Penn State, and you know how that's going right now. It's not looking too good there for Penn State. So I think they can go get that one. And then Oregon, if you look at their schedule, their toughest game is probably on the road last week of the season at Washington. So I think whoever wins this game is either going to only have one loss in the Big Ten or none, and that gets you to the Big Ten championship and into the playoff, and more than likely an 11-1, 11-2, or 12-1, and possibly a top four seed. So I think the winner of this game is going to be that team, and I'm going with the Ducks here. Dante Moore and company have just done not enough because I guess that Oregon game was more just kind of white out, and James Franklin can't win a white out game in prime time. So we're going to really see if this Oregon team is going to be very good because we know Indiana's very good at this point. And now I'm not really sure on Oregon because of how Penn State started to fall off, but they're not they're number three team in the country here. So give me Oregon.
Yeah, it's a really tough place to play. I think it's a big ask for Indiana. But I think if you're an Indiana fan, you're kind of going into this with a house money mindset because, I mean, let's be real. If Indiana loses at Oregon here, and even if they lose at Penn State and go 10-2, they're probably still in the playoffs. So I think, this is almost a can't lose type of game, nothing to lose. So I think they're going to be kind of playing with that type of mindset, and that's always a dangerous team to play. But just a really tough place to play in Oregon. And I think Oregon's got something to prove because a lot of people are talking down on that Penn State win after how that went with UCLA. So, all that being said, I think this will be a great game. I think Indiana's going to be a lot more competitive than their 2 tough games last year. But in the end, I think Oregon wins it at home. I think Dante Moore just makes one more play than Mendoza in this game.
And then moving to the nightcap, we're going to start with Florida and Texas A&M. Obviously, I'm going to give my flowers to Florida here, beating Texas last week at home. But I don't think lightning strikes twice here. I got Texas A&M getting the win here at home and covering. And I will say, though, give Florida credit because, what they did last week was obviously remarkable out of the bye week. And I think they could turn a page for Billy Napier and company at Florida. And I'm going to spend my time talking about Florida here because their record says 2-3, under 500, but if you look at SEC play, they're only 1-1. And if they can go into Texas A&M, pull off a huge upset here, Florida might be even ranked next week at 3-3, just because, what they're building already in SEC play. Because it's not like they got blown out to LSU. They lost to South Florida on pretty much just boneheaded mistakes. And I don't know, Florida, if they can play how they did last week, they're going to play like a top 25 team week in and week out. It just took them a little while to go. But I mean, let's be honest, Texas A&M in this offense looked sluggish last week against Auburn. So I think they're due for a big breakout game here. And this Florida defense, I don't think they're up for the challenge to stop two high-flying offenses here.
Yeah, this Florida schedule has just been brutal. I feel like they're on our picks every week and they're always touchdown dogs. It's just crazy. Not that they're the greatest team ever, but just brutal, brutal schedule. And I think it continues here. I think it's a bounce back week for Marcel Reed, who even in a win did struggle a little bit last week in this Texas A&M offense. We saw their best against Notre Dame. I think we'll see more of that this week. Florida, like you said, lightning struck last week. Is it going to strike again? I don't think so. I think Billy Napier's seat becomes a little more warm, and the Aggies win comfortably here.
And at 7:30, we got our boys going all the way across country to face the Trojans of USC. And the winner of this game, I think, could be contending for that last spot in the Big Ten Championship heading into the last week of the season. And I'm obviously going Michigan here. Obviously, we're underdogs in this one, but if they win this game, I think really the national media is all in on Michigan until that Ohio State game because I don't see them having another loss going into that Ohio State game at the end of the year. It's at home. Bryce Underwood obviously will pretty much have a whole season under his belt heading into that game. So the experience thing, you can throw that out the window of not being able to play in that game because I think this is probably going to be close second to a huge game you need to win, and it's only week 7. So give me Michigan, that dynamic running game now that they've utilized Underwood's legs more. I think they can tame that USC and Lincoln Riley offense just enough. I know they're looking for revenge after last year, but a night game doesn't mean anything for USC because their fans don't even show up anyways.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of Michigan fans there for sure. A lot. Michigan has a huge alumni base out in California. Not that anyone really cares that much, but they will have a lot of fans at this game, and I think that will be a factor. This is a huge game for both of these teams. They both obviously had a down year last year, and a win here, and they're both thinking playoff. They're both thinking they can easily get to 10-2 and make their way into the playoff, maybe even get a home game. So it's a huge turning point for both of their seasons. And the spread has been moving back and forth throughout the week. I think it's going to be very interesting to see where that lands at kickoff, because going on the road, I think is going to be it's going to be tough. Like I said, lots of Michigan fans, but it's a long ways to travel. So I think that's kind of why the line is leaning USC. But I just think Michigan's rushing attack, like it did last year with no quarterback, I think this year it's going to be the difference. I think it'll be another 150-yard, two-touchdown game for Justice Haynes, and Michigan can kind of control the clock, something that USC hasn't really had to deal with this year. And I think even on the road, Michigan can go in and win a close one.
Yeah, and then also at 7:30, we got Georgia and Auburn. And this line opened at 7.5. Georgia was favored. It's down to 3.5, which I'm very surprised on why it's went down. I'm not really sure. But I think if we were to pick a lock of the week, I think it might be Georgia here on the road. And I say that because this Georgia team has played very good football every single week, even in their loss to Alabama. They still struggled a little bit, but they just didn't show up in the second half. In the fourth quarter, especially in a game they easily could have won. They traveled to Neyland and won that game in OT, really showed that they're going to be very good this year. And I think this game is going to be probably a two-possession margin here. So I might be putting a few extra units here on Georgia money line to win this game because I like what they're building out there. Kirby Smart loves it when we're not talking all about Georgia. We're talking about all the other SEC teams. So I think that fits this team well but it also could be a letdown week for Georgia because next week it's Ole Miss at home for Georgia. So look at it two ways, but I think Kirby Smart and this team is just too good to look at as a letdown week. So give me Georgia here on the road at Auburn.
Yeah, I was buying stock on Auburn early in the season, especially after that Baylor win. But that offense has just not been able to move the ball at all, quite frankly. I mean, 10 points against Oklahoma, 10 points against Texas A&M. Jackson Arnold has really struggled, and that offensive line has done him zero favors. I think the Oklahoma game he took 10 sacks. In the A&M game was more of the same. So I think Auburn can keep it close. I think that spread, um, is on to something. I think it will be a close game, but that offense just won't be able to make the play late in the game. So I think Georgia's defense, their defensive line especially, is going to make a late play. And maybe they sleepwalk a little bit through this game, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think that defense is going to have enough for Jackson Arnold to get the win.
Hopefully you get your quad box rolling here because it's Kansas and Texas Tech, and Tech's favored by 2 touchdowns, 14, which I'm kind of surprised that it's not like a 10 point spread because Kansas is a good team. They're 4-2, 2-1 in conference play. But I think Texas Tech, if they get this win here, they can, I don't want to say eliminate Kansas from possibly winning the Big 12, but it would be very bleak for them. And I think they're going to do it because, like I said earlier in the video, I'm very high on Texas Tech. I picked them in my preseason to not only go to the Big 12 championship, but win it and go to the playoff. And I'm still all in on Texas Tech here with that oil money.
Yeah, I agree. The spread does seem high, but I also thought that last week with them going to Houston, and the spread was never even in danger, let alone the game. So I think this Texas Tech team is just really good, and I think we got to start accepting that. And one thing I will say on them, I think we need to kind of dismiss the idea that the Big 12 and ACC can't compete with the Big 10 and the SEC. I think this year it's just so wide open that this Texas Tech team is right there, maybe not with Ohio State and Oregon, but 3 through 8, I think they could compete with all six of those teams. So I think they're going to continue to show that this week, even with a tough Kansas team kind of fighting for their Big 12 and fringe playoff hopes. But I think Texas Tech is just more domination. I think it's like a 35-17 type of game here where they're in firm control, and the Red Raiders just continue to impress.
Yeah, then here's probably your fourth game in that quad box. It's going to be BYU on the road at Arizona. And once again, BYU keeps on winning and not getting talked about. And I like this because, Bear Brockmeyer and BYU can go to 6-0, still be at the top of the Big 12, and nobody's still talking about you until probably next week because you get Utah and then at Iowa State, by at Texas Tech. So they got to win this game if they want to compete with so-called the big dogs in the Big 12 moving forward. I think they're going to do it, get the win here against a surprisingly good Arizona team this year.
Yeah, Arizona has been a very nice surprise. I think I had them like 3-9 in my preseason predictions, so that's not holding up super well. Very surprising start for them, but yeah, like you said, BYU, the same thing as last year where they start out really hot. Nobody's talking about them, but this has just been a very sound team so far. Went to Colorado in a night environment last week and got out of there with a win. So I think this team is just going to do more of the same this week. A night environment is nothing new for them, and I think they just continue to win with Bear Bachmeier at the helm. I think this team's going to be 7-8-0 and have that tough test with Utah, and I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup. And I think they get through this one.
Yeah, and I think this could be a letdown spot for Arizona State because they got Texas Tech next week at home. But I don't know. I'm just not fully in on Utah just yet until they win this game. And if they win this game, then I'm in on Utah again because I think either of these teams could be in that 21 ranking at this point. Obviously Utah lost to Texas Tech. Mi- Mississippi State defeated Arizona State at home. So really, this is probably a coin flip here. I'm taking the spread of Arizona State 5.5 because I think this game's going to come down to the wire and it's going to be decided probably by a late field goal. But I'm going to go with Arizona State in the win because they've played in bigger games than this. There's a lot of team obviously last year from the playoff where Utah had a very bad year last year, and I don't know if they're ready for this moment. But it is at home, so give them benefit of the doubt there. But I just like Sam Levitt. I trust him more than Devin Dampier in a big game.
I'm going the other way. I think Utah makes their way back into the conversation here. Not even ranked going into this game, but I think Devin Dampier does kind of insert himself back into the conversation of top quarterbacks in the Big 12. Arizona State's offense has just been kind of a rough watch at times this year. Last year, obviously, it was just give the ball to Scadaboo, And then with him leaving, a lot of people thought Sam Levitt was going to take a big step this year. And I just haven't really seen that yet. I think the offense is very choppy so far. And I think that's going to show against the tough Utah defense. I think Dampier makes a couple more plays than Levitt does, and Utah gets back on track here. And I think they still have a shot to get that rematch with Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship. This will be a big step toward that.
And that's going to be it for our week 7 picks. Check back next week to see how we did. And obviously, the weeks just keep meaning more and more as we get deeper into the season. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel and don't miss out on any of our content. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.